So let's get started with our session here today. The second part for these breakout sessions in the morning. We're going to be talking about here, focusing on the finishing mortality pillar. Just some housekeeping notes for you guys regarding luggage. So if you have any luggage in the luggage room, they're going to extend the time that you can keep your luggage there until 4 p.m. And for the lunchtime, lunch is going to be back in the ballroom, so the same place that we had lunch yesterday, that's where we're going to have lunch today. So that's a quick comment to you guys on that. So let's get started. Like I mentioned, this is the post-weaning mortality pillar, specifically for finisher mortality. We have a pretty good setup today here with three speakers initially. We're going to have Dr. Emma Coursey, Junhao Huang, and Pete Thomas. And then we're going to have a discussion later with Dr. Chris Sievers also. And the last part of this will be pretty similar to the first part that we had in the morning here today. So an open discussion for the speakers, but also opportunity for you guys to bring ideas or experience that you guys are having. And lastly, what are the next steps, right? Directions for our group here, this Pig Livability group between Kansas State and Iowa State, on where we should focus our priorities for the next year. So let's get started. Our first speaker is Emma Coursey. So Emma is a second-year veterinary student at the University of Illinois. She completed her bachelor's in animal science at Iowa State University, and her interests include swine medicine, herd health, and food animal production. And Emma, she's going to talk about the field assessment research she did of resource-based welfare outcomes in late finishing pigs. So Emma, help me welcome Emma, please, guys. Floor is yours. Thanks for joining us. So here's, this one is the pointer.
Hello, everyone. So this is a collaborative project titled The Field Assessment of Resource-Based Welfare Outcomes in Late Finishing Pigs. And the goal of this project was to evaluate resource-based measures and how they affect key swine welfare outcomes in the late finishing period. This was a collaborative project between some Iowa State researchers, the Iowa Pork Industry Center, 2 undergraduate students, and then industry collaborators who allowed us access to the commercial finishing sites. The objective of this was to determine resource-based measurements to key swine welfare-based measures prior to the first poll on commercial swine barns. We were guided by the 5 figures, domain, and freedoms, which helped us identify practical barn-level factors to help identify what affects pigs' access to feed and water and ultimately their welfare status. This research stems from growing concerns in the industry over barn sizes and the increasing market weights of pigs. In 2023, the average pig market weight size was 284 pounds. When these barns were built, they were built for pigs weighing 240 pounds at market weight. This poses the question of if these barns need updated to better accommodate the larger market weight sizes we are seeing. For materials and method, this data was collected between June and July of 2024, and the summer months were chosen because this is when the behavioral vices are known to be the highest. We went through 71 barns from 2 different companies, and there was about 1,300 pigs per barn. We measured pig body weight with a heart growth tube, and the average body weight was 230 pounds. Data was collected around 18 weeks post-weaning prior to the first poll, and the site or barn data included the number of regular pens, sick pens, the water disappearance from the water meters from the last 7 days, as well as the mortality from the last 4 weeks from the day of the site visit. Our research-based data that we collected included the number of regular pens and sick pens, stocking density, pen dimensions, the feeders, and then we marked the visual pan coverage estimation. We marked 1 as the feeder was very tightly adjusted and there was very little feed to none in the feeder, and 5 being there was excess feed or it was loosely adjusted. We also looked at water nipples, and along with that, we measured flow rates from 10 to 20% of the drinkers, and we measured the seconds it took to fill a 360 milliliter cup, which we standardized throughout all the sites. We also measured the water with pH strips. And in the image on the top right, you can see the heart growth tube, which we used to estimate body weight. The animal-based data we collected included the number of pigs in each pen again, and then we looked at whether they were emaciated, had severe scratches, had open wounds, prolapses, lameness, and then we marked if they had bites. And we specifically marked if that was tail, flank, or ear. And then we took pig weights, and we did this from about 6 pigs and 6 pens per barn. And again, we estimated this using the heart growth tube. So looking more into this, you can see that our mortality from the last 4 weeks had a median of 1.3%, and the median for the animal-based measures summed up was 0.71%. From this, we created a composite animal-based welfare variable, which essentially was the sum of these animal-based measures, and we compared that to mortality. Although we did find no statistically significant relationship between mortality, the observations we made are still valuable in indicating there could be some barn changes that need to be made. It's also important to note that the mortality we took was only from the last 4 weeks from the day of site visit, so further investigation into more mortality from that past could possibly indicate a relationship. And then also throughout these barns, we did see 0.7% of sick pen prevalence, which did indicate some moderate health challenges. Breaking down our animal-based measures, we've seen that biting and open wounds did have the highest incidence observed. We've seen that ear bites was higher in company A, while flank bites was higher in company B. We associate these differences to be from different factors such as feed and water access, the environment, or stocking density, rather than solely genetics alone. Literature also suggests that 25% of the pigs who do tail bites are the lighter weight pigs. Also, those who do ear bites also have a tendency to do tail bites. Looking more into risk factor analysis for our animal-based measures, for this we use the machine learning random forest model to figure out which variables matter most, specifically for open wounds and tail bites, because those were our 2 highest behavioral vices that we've seen. So to read this, you'll look at percent increased mean square error, and you'll see that the max temperature is the variable that matters most, again, for tail bites and open wounds. Max temperature is known to affect many aspects of pig's life, including behavior, and when looking further into this data, we've seen that behavioral vices were actually higher when the temperature was above 80 degrees, but less when the temperature was above 90 degrees. Looking further with tail biting, these are our 2 main risk factors. And on the graph on the left, you can see again that the lower weight pigs do have a higher incidence of tail bites. Looking at the graph on the right, you can see that as pigs per feeder hole increases, so does the incidence of tail biting. Tail biting is known to be linked to many different factors or early life stressors such as environmental challenges, poor health, nutrient deficiencies, which can affect their brain chemistry, cause growth checks, and misdirected foraging. More with tail biting, we've seen that feeders that were adjusted too tight or too loose also had an incidence of tail biting. With this, when the feeder is adjusted too tight, it's going to increase competition and frustration, and that could cause to more behavioral vices. Alternatively, when it's adjusted too loose, it could indicate misdirected foraging due to boredom. Looking further, we've seen that 85% of pan coverage of 5 was a pelleted diet with 40% fines. This could actually indicate a functional feed deficiency, as when you walk up to the trough, it appears as a pan coverage of 5, when actually it's just fines, which is what the pig will not be eating and could be deficient in some nutrients. Our 2 main risk factors for open wounds was the pig weights and space allocation. So looking at the graph on the left, you can see once again that the lower weight pigs do have a higher incidence of open wounds. And on the graph on the right, you can see that when the pen space is less than 8 square feet per pig, we also have a higher incidence of open wounds. Looking at flow rate and water disappearance, we can see that as flow rate increases, so does water disappearance. And then as water disappearance increases, so does the incidence for open wounds. It's recommended that the rate for this is 2 to 4 cups per minute. However, in 63% of our barns, we actually seen that the flow rate was greater than 4 cups per minute, which could explain why we had so many open wounds. It's important to recognize that when your flow rate is adjusted too fast, it'll increase spraying, and it will actually decrease the amount of water they're intaking. It can also create excess manure, which will result in increased pumping costs. However, when it is too low, it will also decrease intake, and it can also result in salt toxicity in extreme cases. So it's very important that you measure your flow rates often and in many of your pens. More with open wounds, that incidence was higher when the feeder hole was less than 12 inches. We actually seen that 28% of the feeder holes were too small for large weight pigs, and 15% were actually too small for our lightweight pigs. The key observations we made for all animal-based measures was that barns with low body weights or less than 230 pounds had higher incidence of welfare issues, and our two main welfare issues we seen was tail biting and open wounds. The incidence of tail biting increased when it was greater than 8 pigs per feeder hole or the feeders were adjusted too tightly or too loosely. The incidence of open wounds increased when the space allocation was less than 8 square feet per pig, water disappearance was greater than 3 gallons per pig per day, and the feeder hole was less than 12 inches. Literature does suggest some solutions, and that could include watching the pigs for 30 minutes to see who the tail biters are. And once you figure that out, you can always add enrichment to the pens, add fiber for gut fill. You can also add salt to the diet, as blood has salt, and that could explain a reason of this tail biting. Other literature shows that pigs actually know and expect when they'll be fed, so trying to avoid feed outages, which could also increase these behavioral vices we've seen. And then most importantly, make sure your stocking densities are accurate, as well as make sure they have adequate access to feed and water space and the correct ventilation. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Emma. So our next speaker is Dr. Junhao Huang. Dr. Huang is a PhD candidate at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and currently he is in the US as a visiting scholar working at Iowa State University with our team at the Animal Science. He's a vet, graduated from China, and his research focused on data analysis and epidemiological modeling of sow mortality at Int'l, the institute in Spain, as well as finished transit loss risk factor analysis and predictive modeling at Iowa State. He's been working on that for the previous 4 months pretty much. He aims to advance data-informed decision-making in swine health management, and so today, Dr. Huang is going to talk about his analysis on evaluation of production and transport factors related to transit loss in market hogs. The floor is yours, Dr. Huang. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Axel, for introducing me. Well, just to mention another time, like I'm a PhD candidate from Autonomous University of Barcelona, and I was doing sow mortality analysis in Int'l. And this project is what I do as a visiting scholar in Iowa State University. Now I'm presenting you evaluating production and transport factors of death on arrival in market hogs. The background of our study is regarding the loading and transferring pigs from the farms to slaughterhouses is a final step in realizing their economic losses, in economic value. But however, during this process, death on arrival can happen, which brings up both concerns about economic loss and animal welfare issue. In the previous study, truck level factors related with DOA, such as loading density, traveling distance, and season were reported. However, the factors from site was not well studied. To dress up this gap, our study investigates both site level and truck level factors to better understand their combined effects. So you can see here the data that were used in our study. The data were from 350 finishing sites from Midwest USA, and which includes 1,948 batches from January 2022 until May 2025. And during this period, 31,471 transport has happened. Each transport records used here was combined with site group finished closeout records from which the loads of pigs came. To analyze this data, we used a negative binomial model with mixed effects, and the outcome of the model is DOA rate per load. And on the right, you can see the procedure of model building. To be mentioned, we turned every numeric variables into quartiles and calculate the average mean of each quartile. And we label them as Q1 to Q4 using as a category of each variable. And to start with this model analyzing. And we used 34 initial variables and ended up with 13 variables in the model, all significant and does not bring up chaotic in the model. And here you can see the distribution of density of DOA. 40.5% of the loads have reported DOA, and the overall mean is 0.42%. And the mean among the loads that has reported DOA is 1.04%. And now I'm going to show you the significant and important result from the multivariate model. As you can see here, the x-axis is a category, as I mentioned before, of the variable, and the y-axis is an estimated DOA percentage calculated by the model, and the point in the figure is an average value of this category, and the bar is 95% confidence interval. And above the bar is a letter that tells if the category is statistically different from other category. So if the letters are different, they are different from each other. And on the top, you can see the sample size. So this one is telling how mortality in the finisher farm associated with a DOA. As you can see, the farm with higher mortality rate was associated with higher DOA. And this one is showing the post-vaccination status. As you can see here, the farm without vaccinated was associated with higher DOA. And along with the previous slide, the hypothesis here is the pigs with worse health status was associated with higher DOA. And this one is a feeder and water type combination. The upper line here is a feeder type, and the line below is a water type. As you can see here, the feeder wet mixed with dry is associated with higher DOA, and dry feeder mixed with cup water is associated with lower DOA. And this one is telling the delivery season associated with DOA. As you can see, summer and fall was associated with higher DOA, which means the heat is a main driver here. And this one is telling the timing of load delivery. From left to right is the first to last cut. And as you can see, the last cut was associated with a higher DOA, and the hypothesis here is pigs that remain longer in the farm might get heavier when they get delivered, so they have higher DOA. And this one is days on feed calculated by load. And also, as you can see, the longest days on feed is associated with higher DOA, which align with the previous slide. And this one is telling the truck level individual weight distribution. The Q4 means the truck has the highest heavy individual percentage, and this kind of truck are associated with higher DOA. So you might want to take a picture here. Here are the result summary of the key factor we talked about before. And the conclusion here is this information can be used for better decision making, like adjusting feeder type, and also vaccination plan can help with evaluate the risk of DOA. And if you want to do transport in summer and fall, maybe avoid the hottest period during the day, and maybe not put all the heavy pigs in one truck, distribute them equally in all the trucks. So the limitation of this study is the model explanatory power is still limited. More variables should be included, such as disease status and the truck and load truck level factors such as traveling distance. But the highlights of our study, it provides a data-driven insight. Like nowadays, almost every farm has their own data, but they were used to do analysis for like production performance. But analysis like what we did here, we provide a forward solution for decision making in the farms. So this study showed the importance of the data analysis. So thank you. Thanks to the team in USA and the team in Spain. Thank you all. If you have a question, please contact me.
Great, thanks Junhao. So moving up to our next speaker, now we have Dr. Pete Thomas with IoSelect Farms. He's going to talk today about his experience on Market Hog sanitation at IoSelect Farms, the experience from the previous years. So Dr. Pete Thomas is Director of Veterinary Service for IoSelect Farms, as I mentioned. Pete is a member of the ASV and has served on its program planning committee, budget committee, and pharmaceutical issues committee. He has also attended the National Pork Producers Council's Pork Leadership Institute and is a certified Pork Quality Assurance Plus advisor through the National Pork Board. Pete graduated from Iowa State University at the College of Vet Med with a Master's of Science degree in Preventive Veterinary Medicine at Iowa State University, and of course his DVN. Pete, thanks for joining us. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and, some of you guys may have seen some of this information already at prior meetings, at the US SHIP meeting and at ASV, so some of this information is the same. And then there's a little bit of new information here as well from the last year, plus some results of closeout analysis that I'll talk about as well. And so just to talk a little bit about the PD history at IoSelect Farms, we would have dealt with PD through everything prior to my time here as it swept through the whole industry in 2013. Nearly all the sow farms were infected at that time. And so at that time, similar to a lot of other producers, there would have been a gilt acclimation program where gilts were acclimated at a young age, which would have kept our sow farms fairly immune and somewhat protected. We did have a few, some years we didn't have any breaks in our sow farms, and some years we had, I think the highest year we had was 3 between 2015 and 2022. And we did have a couple cases where we did spread it from an acclimation site into a breeding GDU. And so because of some of the issues with our gilt populations and what it allowed us to do with flexibility and some of the impact it had on those gilts and still not completely eliminating breaks, we felt like back in March of 2022, we felt like, hey, we could probably get by pretty good at this point in time if we discontinue gilt acclimation. And overall, that's went pretty well. We did have 5 sow farms and one pod break last spring. Before that, we just had 6 breaks, now at just about nearly doubled. But we've had 11 sow farm breaks out of now 52 sow farms over the course of pushing 4 years, coming up on 4 years. So I would say right at or just slightly lower than I think what the MSHMP reports, I think annually gets in that 6 to 8% range. So overall, that has went really well despite some nervousness with all of our animals in Iowa. When you look at our sow farms, you can see there's a combination of big pigs and little pigs on this. All the little pigs would be wean to finish sites or nurseries or feeder to finish sites, and then the big ones would be our sow farms. And so you can see our sow farms are located in very swine dense areas, and so the status of finishing sites, both ours and others surrounding our sow farms, is important to us in terms of PED and the risk into our sow farms. So prior to the winter of 2023, 2024, we would have washed every 4th load, essentially to get trailers clean. And then any farm that was graded loads going out within 2 miles of a sow farm, those would have all been washed. That would have been our strategy prior to that 2023, 2024 winter. In week 46 of 2023 is when we started washing all of our market trucks. So that didn't matter if it was a graded load or a run-out load or where that farm was at relative to our sow farms. They all started getting washed at that time. And so a couple things, some of our key goals were, number one, set a biosecurity culture on our wean to finish sites. It's really hard to talk to a caretaker about biosecurity, and they have the trump card of, well, you bring me a dirty trailer and break my site with PD every turn. That's the reality of a tough conversation. And then also capture some of the losses due to lost weights and nursery mortality from rebreaks to subsequent turn, or the loss in weights that occur during the marketing break. At that time, we had a model that we used for putting Paline in back when we used Paline, and so we basically used PED as a surrogate for Paline. And so our estimate, looking at back, I think we did this in between 2018 and 2022, was probably annually, when you looked at our rebreak rate in wean pigs, and when you looked at lost pounds at market and days on feed, we were probably around annually $1.15 per pig. But this was certainly an estimate, not necessarily something that we knew for a fact. And then we would also, say, as we got away from acclimating gilts, we really do need to reduce the risk around our sow farms, or we're staying to have, substantial risk to our sow farms. When you looked at our break rate over the years, when we first started, we had about a 20% break rate on our wean pigs, and primarily sites that broke at marketing that we couldn't get effectively sanitized or cleaned up in the wintertime. And then our worst year for marketing breaks was the winter of 2019 and 2020. We had about 38% of our market groups broke during marketing that winter. So, and then when you look at the first year we implemented washing every trailer, we went down to a 2% break on wean pigs, and we were at a 5.8% break rate on market groups. And if you actually look, about half of our breaks occurred prior to week 46 that winter. And so when you actually look from 46 on, we were about 11x reduction in outbreaks when we started washing trailers in our market breaks. And so this breaks it down by week, and you can see we were running pretty even from week 42 to week 45, which is about where half of our breaks came from that year. And then when we implemented at week 46, we still had some breaks, but much reduced compared to the prior winter. Just looking at that a little bit of a different way, the total number of sites placed that winter was marketed was 656, and those 38 breaks. Again, a lot of those came in those 4 weeks where we still weren't washing, and then really low on our number of wean breaks for us in the wintertime. 7 sites out of 350 with all the challenges that we have felt really good, almost 10 times less than what we'd had back in 2018. And at that point in time, we'd put some other things in place. We'd hired a guy to basically go inspect sites. We started whitewashing. We put some, I would say, cheaper interventions in place relative to what it would cost to wash trailers, and saw some really good results with that. Okay, so then last winter, looking at cost savings and what we had learned, week 5, so we didn't actually start this. In the fall, we started it kind of the first week of February. We stopped washing trailers that were within 2 nights of the last load out. So as an example, if we were going to run the last pigs out of a site tonight, tonight's trailers would be dirty and last night's trailers would be dirty. So we say we're not getting probably any benefit, from a disease standpoint, in that last 24 hours for sure with the incubation time. Now, in reality, loads change, loads gets canceled. Would I say I feel confident that trucks didn't get rerouted? Absolutely not. I don't know where they did or didn't, but I think that's why we did see a higher break rate. We are actually almost exactly the same incidence rate up until that point in time from this year or last winter compared to the winter before. And once we stopped washing trailers, we started seeing more PED breaks. We ended up about 3x during that stretch of time. So from week 5 to week 23, I think we ended up with, I don't think I have it on the slide, but it was like 34 breaks last winter. And the year before we had been at like 12. So it was like a 3x increase, but still running almost 5 times lower than where we were at prior to washing any trailer. So still saw a huge reduction in the incidence. And with that, we were washing 68% of our trailers. So we went from 100% down to 68%. So we could save about a third of the cost there. Now we haven't, determine what the best strategy is moving forward. Right now, we're continuing with the strategy that we had implemented week 5, and I think we've only had one break in marketing so far this year. But you can see by reducing and not washing every trailer and just trying to focus on runouts, we did increase the prevalence of PED over the last year. When you look at the market break, so this would be closeouts from September of 2022 to December of 2024. And so Edison's group over at Iowa State has been working with us very closely on some analysis. And so the one thing I'll say, put a plug in, Edison's got a causal model, multivariate analysis, looking at a lot of other factors like health status at placement and other things related to production and health of the pigs. But at least on the initial glance on that, I think they're going to mirror the raw means probably pretty closely. I don't think we're going to see any major differences, but I think the key things to point out is we saw about a 1/10 worse feed conversion in the pigs that broke at marketing, and about a 3-pound lighter carcass with basically the exact same days on feed. And so when you think about where probably the big cost savings is, that 1/10 of feed conversion and that 3-pound carcass. From a mortality standpoint, we tried to look at it both overall, but really like what I wanted to look at was mortality after 120 days on feed. That's a cutoff that we have. We kind of break ours into 0 to 60, 60 to 120, and then 120 days plus. And it was about 0.5% higher on raw means. And at least on the initial look at the causal model, probably a good chunk of that washed out. But when you look at the carcass and the feed conversion, it looks like that's probably going to hold. And then a little bit higher, maybe 0.6, 0.7% higher lights there as well. So I don't have any financials put to this for this presentation, but I think everybody can probably, take this and look at it with their feed costs and their what they're getting currently for their pigs, and make some analysis themselves of what it looks like with their break rates and with the advantage, how that dovetails in with paying to wash your trailers. And then I'll show a little bit, because I think it's directly related, again, wean site breaks, and again, just showing from our peak in 2018, 2019 to where we're at today. So you can definitely do things between interventions with site sanitation and market trailers to reduce those breaks in your wean pigs. And when we look at what the cost in wean, the same closeouts, if we look at groups that broke at wean pigs as opposed to groups that broke at market, it's about a 4% mortality during that nursery phase. Didn't see as much feed conversion. There's probably some compensation that I would say that pig probably makes up throughout its lifetime there. But we did see that, especially that mortality, and then still saw about a 5-pound carcass weight difference when we got those pigs to market. And then also 3 more days on feed for those pigs that broke early on. So there's definitely some cost advantages to not breaking your wean pig groups as a result of breaking your market groups that you would probably want to add into the analysis of what it costs you to break a market group if you're re-breaking wean pigs due to that market break. Just like to thank especially Alisi in University of Turin in Italy, who is visiting scientists working with Edison and Edison's group at Iowa State, helping us analyze those closeouts. And I'm sure, I know he's looking at getting that causal model all put together and some good financial analysis to present as well later on. So that's what I got.